The text arrived at 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Just as I was folding tissue paper around the last ornament I'd never get to give. My phone buzzed against the kitchen table where Martha's recipe cards still lay scattered. Her handwriting on faded index cards, like whispered promises I could no longer keep. Dad, don't come tomorrow. Your presence makes everyone tense. I read Megan's message 3 times before the words settled into my chest like stones dropped into still water. Each word created its own ripple of understanding, spreading outward until the full weight of her dismissal reached the deepest parts of my heart. Outside, snow fell in the kind of perfect silence that Martha used to say made Christmas mornings feel like prayers. Through my kitchen window, I watched the Peterson family loading presents into their car for the drive to grandmother's house. The warm glow from their windows painted golden rectangles across the white yard. A Norman Rockwell painting I was no longer invited to be part of. I set the phone down carefully, as if sudden movements might shatter what remained of this evening. The ornament in my hands was a small wooden angel Martha had bought for Megan's first Christmas 32 years ago. Every year since, it had found its place on my daughter's tree. This year, it would remain in my palm, homeless. The surface story was simple enough. Megan was hosting Christmas dinner for the first time in her new house. A house I'd helped her afford with the down payment that had consumed most of my pension savings. She'd been planning for weeks, posting pictures on Instagram of her designer decorations and carefully curated table settings. Everything had to be perfect for her social media followers. But beneath that polished surface ran deeper currents of truth. This was our first Christmas without Martha. The first time I'd wake up on Christmas morning to silence, instead of her gentle humming, as she prepared our traditional breakfast. The first time I'd sit alone with my coffee, watching the sunrise paint our backyard in shades of pink and gold that would remind me of the blush on her cheeks when she was excited about surprising the grandchildren. Martha had been gone 8 months, but grief moves in its own time, following no calendar that others can understand. Some days, I could almost pretend she'd just stepped out to the garden. Other days, like tonight, her absence felt like a physical weight pressing against my ribs. I walked to the living room where my Christmas tree stood in the corner. 43 years of collected memories hung from its branches. The construction paper star Megan had made in 2nd grade, now brown with age but still holding the place of honor at the top. The ceramic Santa that Martha had insisted on buying during our honeymoon in Vermont, when we could barely afford dinner at the roadside diner, but she'd fallen in love with his painted smile. Each ornament held a story, and tonight they all felt like evidence in a case I was losing. The case for my own relevance in my daughter's life. My phone buzzed again. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest like a bird testing its wings. Maybe Megan had reconsidered. Maybe she'd remembered that Christmas wasn't about perfectly arranged table settings or Instagram-worthy photographs. Hope you understand, Dad. We'll do something just the 2 of us next week. Next week. When the cameras were put away and the performance was over. When spending time with her grieving father wouldn't risk ruining the aesthetic of her holiday celebration. I sank into Martha's chair, the one I still couldn't bring myself to call mine, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not breaking exactly, but rearranging itself into a different shape. The shape of a man who had finally understood something important about the daughter he'd raised, and the relationship he'd thought they shared. For 32 years, I'd been Megan's safety net. When she'd wanted to go to the expensive private college instead of the state school we could afford, I'd worked overtime at the bank for 2 years straight. when her dream wedding had exceeded her budget by $15,000, I'd quietly taken out a loan against the house Martha and I had nearly finished paying off. When she and her husband had needed help with their down payment, I'd handed over my pension savings with a smile, telling myself it was an investment in her future. But safety nets, I realized, are meant to be invisible. They exist in the spaces between success and failure, only noticed when everything else gives way. Most of the time, they're simply taken for granted. An assumption as basic as gravity or sunrise. I thought about the gifts still wrapped under my tree, carefully chosen over weeks of shopping. A cashmere scarf for Megan in the exact shade of blue Martha had always said brought out the color of her eyes. Books for my grandchildren, selected from memory of the stories they'd once begged me to read to them. A bottle of wine that had cost more than I usually spent on groceries in a week, chosen because the label reminded me of the vineyard where Megan and her husband had honeymooned. None of it mattered now. Christmas morning would come and go without witness to these small acts of love. The gifts would remain under the tree like physical proof of my miscalculation, evidence that I'd overestimated my importance in the lives of people I would have died to protect. But as I sat there in Martha's chair, surrounded by the memories we'd built together over 4 decades of shared Christmases, something unexpected began to take root in the fertile soil of my disappointment. Not anger. I'd learned long ago that anger was just grief-wearing work clothes. Something calmer, but more purposeful. Something that felt like the first stirring of freedom. Martha used to say that the best gifts were the ones that changed both the giver and the receiver. She'd learned that from her mother, who'd survived the Depression by understanding that generosity was not about having enough to spare, but about finding meaning in the act of giving itself. Tomorrow was Christmas morning. I would wake up alone in the house that held 43 years of holiday memories. I could spend the day feeling sorry for myself, or I could remember what Martha had taught me about the true spirit of Christmas. My phone sat silent on the side table, its screen dark as a winter sky before dawn. I didn't pick it up to call Megan. I didn't send a message asking her to reconsider. Instead, I reached for the phone book. Yes, I still had one. And looked up the number for the Riverside Shelter downtown. Riverside Shelter, this is Maria. Hello? I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. I'm wondering if you need any volunteers for Christmas morning. There was a pause, and then warmth flooded through the phone line like sunshine breaking through clouds. Oh, bless you, yes. We always need help serving Christmas dinner. Can you be here by 8? I'll be there at 7:30, I told her. After I hung up, I sat for a long time in the quiet house, feeling something shift back into place inside my chest. Tomorrow, I would spend Christmas morning with people who understood what it meant to be grateful for simple kindness. People who wouldn't judge the appropriateness of my grief or worry about how my presence might affect their social media image. Martha's voice seemed to whisper through the silence. The best gifts change both the giver and the receiver, David. I smiled, looking at our Christmas tree with its 43 years of memories. Tomorrow, I would start making new ones. I woke before dawn on Christmas morning, not to the sound of excited grandchildren running down hallways, but to the hollow silence that had become my constant companion since Martha passed. The house felt like a theater after the last audience had gone home. All the sets still in place. But no one left to appreciate the performance when 11:15. I'd always been an early riser, a habit formed during 40 years of banking, where the first one in set the tone for the entire day. But this morning felt different. Purpose moved through my veins like coffee, warming me from the inside out. As I dressed in my best sweater, the navy one Martha had given me last Christmas, with a note that said, "For the man who makes every day feel like a gift," I found myself thinking about the ledger I'd never kept. Not the kind with numbers and balances that had dominated my professional life, but the invisible accounting that every parent maintains. The record of sacrifices made and love given, with no expectation of return. The surface story was simple. I was heading to volunteer at a homeless shelter because my daughter had uninvited me from Christmas dinner. But the deeper current running beneath that narrative was more complex. A 43-year relationship with someone I'd thought I knew, now revealing itself in a different light. I walked through the house, coffee mug in hand, and let the memories speak their quiet truths. The piano in the living room that we'd bought when Megan was 7, convinced she'd inherited Martha's musical gifts. For 2 years, I'd driven across town twice a week for lessons she'd complained about every mile of the way. The piano now served as a display case for her wedding photos. Beautiful pictures that had cost a fortune and captured not a single genuine smile. In the kitchen, Martha's recipe box sat exactly where she'd left it. The cards still scattered from my late-night attempt to feel close to her through her handwriting. I picked up the one for Christmas cookies, her notes in the margins. "David loves extra vanilla, and always make double batch. Megan takes half home." When had I last seen those cookies at Megan's table? When had she last asked for the recipe? The phone rang at 7:30, jarring me from my reverie. "Dad?" Megan's voice carried the forced brightness of someone working very hard to sound casual. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay with everything. You know, about today." Surface conversation, I thought. The safe kind where feelings hide behind politeness, like actors behind masks. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, and was surprised to realize it was true. "I hope you have a wonderful day." "We will. We are." A pause, then the sound of something sizzling in the background. "I'm making Mom's sweet potato casserole. Well, trying to. I can't find the recipe." The deeper story revealed itself in that moment. Megan reaching for traditions she'd never bothered to learn, grasping for connections to a mother she'd been too busy to properly know during those final months of illness. "It's in her box," I said gently. "Third card from the front, with the green stain from when she spilled food coloring on it." "Oh, right," I thought. "Well, I figured you might have brought the box today. To share recipes and stuff. To contribute to the performance," the unspoken subtext whispered. "To provide the authentic touches that would make her Instagram Christmas complete." "I'm actually heading out soon," I told her. "Have some plans of my own." Silence stretched between us, like the years of assumptions we'd built our relationship on. "Plans? What kind of plans?" Her voice sharpened with what might have been concern or might have been curiosity about what her excluded father could possibly be doing that was more important than feeling sorry for himself. "Nothing dramatic. Just spending the morning with people who might appreciate the company." Another pause, longer this time. In the background, I could hear her husband's voice asking something about the oven temperature. "Well, okay then. I should go. The turkey needs things." After she hung up, I stood holding the phone, struck by the realization that my daughter, brilliant, successful, organized to a fault Megan, didn't actually know how to cook a turkey. 32 years old, and she'd never learned because Martha and I had always handled the holidays. We'd been so eager to give her the childhood we'd never had, so determined to shoulder every burden that we'd forgotten to teach her how to carry her own weight. I walked to my desk and pulled out the folder I'd been avoiding for months. The one Martha had organized with her typical thoroughness during those final weeks when she'd still believed she might recover. David's important papers, she'd labeled it in her careful script. Inside, she'd cataloged everything. Bank statements showing the college tuition payments, receipts from Megan's wedding vendors, documentation of the down payment loan that had nearly emptied our retirement savings. $22,000 for sophomore year alone when Megan had decided state school was beneath her aspirations. $35,000 for a wedding that lasted 6 hours but took 2 years to plan. $60,000 for the house down payment because starter homes aren't really investments, Daddy. Martha had organized it all without judgment, simply accepting that this was what love looked like in our family. An endless stream of financial support flowing in one direction, like a river that never questioned why the sea never flowed back uphill. But rivers change course sometimes. Erosion works slowly, then suddenly, carving new channels when the old ones can no longer contain what they're meant to carry. I thought about the conversation I'd overheard 3 weeks ago when Megan had called Martha's sister to discuss the situation with Dad. He's just so sad all the time, Aunt Linda. It's exhausting. I mean, I miss Mom too, but he acts like the world ended. And he wants to talk about her constantly, which just brings everyone down. I'd been standing in the garage, holding a box of Christmas decorations, when her words drifted through the thin walls of our shared grief. The deeper story revealed itself in that moment. My daughter saw my mourning not as a natural response to losing my partner of 41 years, but as an inconvenience that interfered with her comfort. Maybe he should talk to someone, Linda had suggested. Professional help. I've tried. He says talking to strangers won't bring her back. It's like he wants to stay stuck in this place. And honestly, it's not fair to make the rest of us live in his misery. The rest of us. As if grief were a choice I was selfishly inflicting on my family, rather than something that had moved into my bones like winter, changing the very way I moved through the world. Now, dressed and ready to spend Christmas morning with strangers who wouldn't judge my sadness or worry about how my presence might affect their carefully curated happiness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. The Riverside shelter was a 15-minute drive through streets lined with houses glowing warm and golden in the early morning light. Families were already gathering around Christmas trees, children tearing through wrapping paper while parents documented every moment with cameras and phones. I thought about Megan's Instagram account, which I'd reluctantly joined months ago at her insistence. Dad, you need to stay connected, she'd said. It's how families share their lives now. What she'd meant was that it was how she wanted to share our lives. Carefully edited versions that told the story she preferred. Her latest post had been yesterday evening, a perfectly staged photo of her dining room table, set with Martha's good china. When had she taken that? And candles arranged like something from a magazine. The caption read, "Ready for our intimate family Christmas. Sometimes the most meaningful celebrations are the smallest ones. Blessed #family Christmas 2023. Intimate family Christmas. As if excluding me had been a design choice rather than an act of cruelty. But as I pulled into the shelter's parking lot and saw the volunteers already gathering, loading their arms with serving dishes and rolls of paper towels, I realized something important. I was about to spend Christmas morning with my real family. The family that understood what Martha had tried to teach me all those years ago. That the best gifts are the ones that change both the giver and the receiver. Inside the shelter, Maria greeted me with a smile that could have powered the whole building. You must be David. Thank you so much for coming. We serve about 200 people today, and every pair of hands helps. 200 people who would be grateful for a hot meal and a kind word. 200 people who wouldn't judge my grief or worry about how my presence might affect their Instagram aesthetic. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work, feeling something shift inside my chest. Not healing, not yet, but the first stirring of possibility, the first sense that maybe, just maybe, this Christmas morning might give me something I hadn't expected. And maybe, through the magic of social media that Megan had insisted would connect us, she might learn something too. By 8:30 Christmas morning, I was ladling mashed potatoes onto plates that would be received with more gratitude than any meal I'd ever prepared. The riverside shelter hummed with the kind of genuine warmth that can't be staged for cameras. Volunteers moving with practiced efficiency. Residents gathering around tables decorated with construction paper angels made by local school children. This was Christmas without performance, without the pressure of perfection. Just people taking care of people because it was Christmas morning and everyone deserved to feel like they mattered. First time volunteering? Asked Sarah, a retired teacher who'd been working the Christmas shift for 12 years. She moved beside me with the fluid grace of someone who'd found her calling in service. First time doing anything like this, I admitted, surprised by how natural it felt to be honest with a stranger. My usual Christmas plans changed. Sarah nodded with the understanding of someone who'd heard many stories over the years. Sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in disappointment, she said, handing me a fresh ladle. Looks like you're discovering that. The surface story was simple. I was serving Christmas dinner to people less fortunate than myself. But the deeper current running through this morning was revelation, discovering that I'd spent years mistaking performance for love, transaction for relationship. At 9:15, my phone buzzed. A text from Megan. Dad, I can't find Mom's gravy recipe anywhere. It's not in the box. Help? I smiled, picturing her in her perfectly appointed kitchen, surrounded by ingredients she didn't know how to combine, trying to recreate memories she'd never bothered to learn how to make. It was never written down. She made it by feel. Start with the turkey drippings and add flour slowly. How much flour? Until it looks right. That's not helpful, Dad. I need measurements. I set the phone aside without responding. Some lessons couldn't be texted. Some knowledge came only from standing beside someone year after year, watching their hands, learning their rhythms, understanding that love was less about following recipes and more about paying attention. At 10 o'clock, a family of 4 approached my serving station. Parents who couldn't have been older than 30. 2 children clinging to their legs like frightened anchors. The mother's eyes held that particular exhaustion that comes from trying to explain poverty to children who deserve better. Merry Christmas, I said to the little girl, maybe 6 years old, who peered up at me from behind her father's jeans. Is Santa coming here? She whispered, and the question broke something open in my chest. I think Santa's already here, I told her, gesturing around the room filled with volunteers. He just looks different than expected. Her face brightened with the kind of uncomplicated joy that adults spend lifetimes trying to recapture. Her mother squeezed my hand as they moved down the line, her eyes saying what words couldn't. Thank you for seeing her as a child, not a charity case. Martha would have loved this, I realized. She'd spent years trying to teach Megan that the best parts of Christmas had nothing to do with the size of the gift or the elegance of the presentation. She'd tried to show her that love wasn't measured in dollars spent, but in attention paid. Not in perfect moments captured for social media, but in imperfect moments lived fully. At 10:30, another volunteer approached with a camera. Mind if I take some photos for our newsletter? She asked. People like to see their donations in action. I almost said no. Old habits of privacy dying hard. But something made me reconsider. Maybe it was the memory of Megan's Instagram post about her intimate family Christmas. Maybe it was the realization that sometimes the best way to teach someone about authenticity is to model it. Sure, I said. As long as you focus on the people being served, not the servers. But she took pictures anyway. Candid shots of volunteers and residents sharing meals, laughing together, creating community in the most unlikely place. Later, I would discover that these photos found their way onto social media platforms I barely understood. Tagged by other volunteers who wanted to share the joy they'd witnessed. By 11 o'clock, word had spread through the shelter's network in the way good news travels, quickly and with gathering momentum. Other volunteers began sharing their own posts. Pictures of the Christmas morning crew, stories of the man who'd joined them for the first time, gratitude for the community that formed when people gathered to serve rather than to be served. The deeper story was writing itself without my knowledge or intention. While I focused on the simple task of serving meals and making conversation, the narrative of my Christmas morning was being documented and shared by people who understood instinctively that this was what Christmas was supposed to look like. At 11:30, my phone began buzzing with notifications I didn't understand. Facebook tags, Instagram mentions, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all, too absorbed in the immediate reality of the morning to pay attention to its digital echo. "You're popular today," Sarah observed, noticing my constantly buzzing phone. "Just family checking in," I said, not entirely understanding the irony of that statement. But at 11:45, a call came through that I couldn't ignore. Megan's name on the screen, ringing with an urgency that made other conversations pause. "Dad, where are you?" Her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Something sharper than concern, more brittle than curiosity. "I'm volunteering. Remember? I told you I had plans." "Volunteering where?" "Riverside Shelter. Why?" Silence stretched between us, filled with the background noise of her perfect Christmas celebration and the gentle hum of authentic community service. "People are posting pictures of you online," she said finally. "My friends are seeing them. They're asking questions." "What kind of questions?" Another pause, longer this time. In the background, I could hear her husband asking something about the turkey temperature, oblivious to the drama unfolding in his perfectly orchestrated day. "They're asking why my father is spending Christmas morning serving homeless people while I'm having dinner without him." The deeper story revealed itself in that moment, sharp and clear as winter sunlight. Megan wasn't concerned about my well-being or my loneliness. She was worried about how my choices reflected on her carefully constructed image. "And what are you telling them?" I asked, though I already knew. "I don't know what to tell them, Dad. This is embarrassing." Embarrassing. The word hung between us like a blade, cutting through 43 years of assumptions about our relationship. "I see," I said quietly. "I'm embarrassing you by serving Christmas dinner to families who need it." "That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, sweetheart. The question is, why?" I hung up before she could answer, not out of anger, but out of clarity. For the first time in months, I could see the situation with perfect focus. My daughter wasn't worried about me spending Christmas alone. She was worried about explaining to her friends why her father was demonstrating the kind of Christmas spirit that made her own celebration look hollow by comparison. Around me, the shelter continued its gentle celebration of community and service. Families finished their meals and lingered at tables, reluctant to leave the warmth they'd found here. Volunteers began the easy cleanup that comes when everyone contributes without being asked. At noon, as I helped stack chairs and wipe down tables, Sarah approached me one more time. "You know," she said, "we could use someone like you on a regular basis, not just holidays. Every Tuesday we serve lunch, and we're always short-handed." I looked around the room one more time, at the families who'd been grateful for simple kindness, at the volunteers who'd found joy in service, at the community that formed when people gathered with authentic intention. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that very much." As I drove home through streets filled with families enjoying their Christmas afternoon, I realized that I'd found something I hadn't been looking for. A place where my presence was wanted rather than tolerated, where my contributions were valued rather than judged, where Christmas meant what Martha had always tried to teach me it should mean. My phone continued buzzing with notifications I still didn't fully understand. But for the first time in 8 months, I felt genuinely curious about what tomorrow might bring. I arrived home at 1:30 that afternoon, my heart fuller than it had been in months, and my phone buzzing like an angry wasp trapped in a jar. The contrast struck me immediately. The warmth I'd found among strangers, and the cold anxiety radiating from a device that connected me to people who were supposed to love me most. Martha's garden looked peaceful under its blanket of Christmas snow, the bare branches of her rose bushes reaching toward a sky that promised more winter to come. I stood at the kitchen window, still wearing my volunteer apron, and watched the Peterson family next door building a snowman in their front yard. 3 generations working together, grandparents steadying the middle snowball while parents lifted children high enough to place the coal eyes just right. This was what I'd missed. Not the perfectly staged dinner or the Instagram-worthy table settings, but the simple joy of family creating something together, messy and imperfect and real. My phone rang at 2 o'clock. Not Megan this time, but her friend Jennifer. A woman I'd known since she and Megan were college roommates. Someone who'd called me Mr. D for over a decade and always remembered to ask about Martha during her illness. "David," she said, and her voice carried the careful tone of someone navigating uncomfortable territory. "I hope I'm not overstepping, but I saw the pictures from the shelter today." The surface conversation was about social media and volunteer work. The deeper story was about judgment and loyalty, about a friendship caught between truth and politeness. "Which pictures?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. Sarah Martinez posted some beautiful photos of the Christmas service. You looked happy. Really happy. I haven't seen you smile like that since Martha." She didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. "It was a good morning," I said simply. "David, I have to ask, where was Megan today?" The question hung between us like smoke from a fire neither of us had intended to start. Jennifer had been at countless family gatherings over the years, had seen the easy relationship I'd thought I shared with my daughter. She'd watched Megan open presents I'd carefully chosen, had witnessed the birthday celebrations I'd planned with Martha's meticulous attention to detail. She was hosting Christmas at her house, I said. Her first time taking on the whole production. Without you. The words carried weight that numbers couldn't measure. 43 years of Christmas mornings, 4 decades of being the father who showed up, who carved the turkey and told embarrassing stories and made sure everyone felt included in the celebration. She felt it was time to start her own traditions, I said, surprised by how diplomatic I could sound when my heart was breaking in slow motion. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more uncertain. David, I'm at Megan's party right now. In fact, that's why I'm calling. My chest tightened like a fist around my ribs. Oh? People are talking about the photos, about you spending Christmas mornings serving meals while... She paused, searching for words that wouldn't betray her friendship with my daughter, while still honoring whatever truth she was trying to tell me. While I wasn't invited to my own daughter's Christmas celebration? Yes. The simple word carried 40 years of understanding between two people who'd watched children grow up, who'd navigated the complex territory of family relationships and social expectations and the sometimes brutal arithmetic of choosing sides. What are they saying? Another pause. In the background, I could hear the carefully orchestrated sounds of Megan's perfect party. Laughter that sounded rehearsed, conversation that felt performed, the subtle anxiety that comes when people are working too hard to have a good time. They're asking questions, David. Hard questions. About why you're not here, about what kind of family dynamic would lead to... She stopped herself. Lead to what? Lead to a daughter hosting Christmas dinner while her recently widowed father serves meals to strangers. The deeper story revealed itself in that moment, sharp and clear as winter air. Megan's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling under the weight of other people's basic human decency. Her friends, good people who understood family loyalty and holiday traditions, couldn't make sense of a story where the grieving father was excluded while everyone else gathered to celebrate. At 2:15, while I was still processing Jennifer's call, another call came through. This time, it was Tom Harrison, Martha's old boss from the library where she'd worked part-time before her illness. Tom had always been fond of our family, had attended Megan's graduation, and sent flowers for Martha's funeral. David, my wife showed me the pictures from the shelter today. I just wanted to say how proud Martha would be. The words hit me like a physical embrace, warming places inside my chest that had been cold since August. Thank you, Tom. That means more than you know. Listen, I hope this isn't presumptuous, but we're having some folks over for evening coffee and dessert. Nothing fancy, just neighbors and friends. Would you like to join us? I looked around my empty house, at the Christmas tree surrounded by unopened gifts, at the kitchen where Martha's recipe cards still lay scattered like prayers I'd never finished saying. I'd like that very much, I said. At 2:30, my phone rang again. Megan, her voice tight with something between panic and anger. Dad, we need to talk. I'm listening. People won't stop asking about you, about where you are, about why you're not here. It's making everyone uncomfortable. The surface story was about social awkwardness and party dynamics. The deeper current was about a daughter discovering that her friends possessed the basic human decency she'd somehow misplaced. I'm sorry people are uncomfortable, I said, and meant it. I never intended to cause problems at your gathering. Then why did you post those pictures? I didn't post anything, sweetheart. Other people shared photos from their morning. That's what happens when people are moved by something genuine. Silence stretched between us, filled with the sound of her perfect party, continuing its careful performance in the background. Dad, you need to understand something. This is embarrassing. My friends think I'm some kind of heartless person who abandoned her father on Christmas. Are you? The question slipped out before I could stop it, honest and sharp as a blade cutting through 43 years of careful politeness. What's that supposed to mean? It means that maybe your friends are seeing something clearly that you've been avoiding looking at. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more brittle. "That's not fair, Dad. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. This is my first time hosting Christmas, and I needed it to be perfect. Having you here, all sad and talking about Mom constantly, would have ruined the whole atmosphere. Ruined the atmosphere. As if my grief for the woman who'd given birth to her, who'd raised her with infinite patience and love, was some kind of party foul rather than the natural response of a man who'd lost his partner of 4 decades. "I see," I said quietly. "And what atmosphere were you hoping to create? A happy one, a celebration, something people would remember fondly, not some depressing memorial service for Mom." The deeper truth emerged in that moment, clear and painful as surgery without anesthesia. My daughter wasn't just uncomfortable with my presence. She was uncomfortable with my grief, with any reminder that her mother had lived and died and left behind people who missed her with bone-deep longing. "Megan," I said gently, "your mother's memory isn't something to be hidden away like an embarrassing relative. She's part of every Christmas we'll ever have, whether we acknowledge her or not. I know that, Dad. But I can't spend every holiday drowning in sadness. I have to move forward. No one's asking you to drown in sadness. But moving forward doesn't require forgetting. And it certainly doesn't require excluding the people who loved her most." At 3 o'clock, as if orchestrated by some cosmic sense of timing, my doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see a small group of people standing on my porch, holding covered dishes and wearing expressions of kind determination. Tom Harrison and his wife, Sarah from the shelter, Jennifer, who must have left Megan's party to be here, Mrs. Peterson from next door, carrying what looked like leftover Christmas cookies. "Looks like I have company arriving," I told Megan. "Company? Who?" "People who understand that Christmas is about showing up for each other, especially when someone is struggling." I opened the door to faces that glowed with genuine warmth. People who decided that a recently widowed man shouldn't spend Christmas evening alone, regardless of whatever family drama had left him excluded from his daughter's celebration. As they filed into my living room, commenting appreciatively on Martha's decorations and the smell of the coffee I'd put on, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not healing, not yet, but the recognition that family wasn't always about blood relations. Sometimes it was about people who showed up when showing up mattered most. Through the phone, I could hear the sounds of Megan's party continuing. Laughter that was trying too hard, conversation that felt increasingly forced as more people noticed the host's growing distraction. "Dad," she said, her voice smaller now, more uncertain. "Maybe we should talk later, after everyone goes home." "Maybe we should," I agreed. "But Megan, when you're ready to have that conversation, I hope you'll be prepared to listen as much as you talk." I hung up as Sarah was admiring Martha's Christmas angel collection, as Tom was asking about the photos on the mantelpiece, as Jennifer was quietly arranging the desserts people had brought on Martha's good plates. This was Christmas as it was meant to be. Imperfect, impromptu, and absolutely authentic. People gathering not because the table setting was perfect or the menu was Instagram-worthy, but because someone needed community and they had community to give. My phone continued buzzing with notifications I still didn't fully understand. But for the first time all day, I turned it off completely. The digital world could wait. The real world was happening right here in my living room, where people who understood the true meaning of Christmas had created the very warmth that Megan had been trying so hard to manufacture. My evening guests stayed until nearly 10 o'clock, filling my house with the kind of laughter that comes when people aren't performing for cameras, but simply enjoying each other's company. We shared stories about Martha, looked through photo albums I hadn't opened in months, and somehow managed to transform what could have been the loneliest Christmas of my life into something unexpectedly beautiful. After everyone left, I sat in my living room surrounded by the gentle aftermath of genuine community. Coffee cups that held the warmth of real conversation, dessert plates that bore witness to authentic sharing. The lingering presence of people who'd chosen to show up when showing up mattered most. At 10:30, just as I was loading the dishwasher with a lightness I hadn't felt since Martha passed, my doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see Megan standing on my porch, still wearing her Christmas dress, but with her careful composure completely undone. Her shoulders shook with the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper than disappointment. The tears that fall when someone finally sees themselves clearly and doesn't like what they discover. I opened the door to my daughter's devastation. "Dad," she whispered, and the word came out broken, like glass that had been dropped and couldn't be put back together the same way. "Can I come in?" The surface story was simple. My daughter had come to apologize for excluding me from Christmas. But the deeper current flowing beneath that moment was transformation. The painful recognition that occurs when someone realizes they've become a person they never intended to be. "Of course," I said, stepping aside to let her enter the home she'd grown up in. The space that still held 43 years of Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations and ordinary Tuesday evenings that had somehow added up to a childhood. She walked into the living room and stopped, taking in the evidence of the evening I'd shared with people who'd understood what she hadn't. That Christmas wasn't about perfect presentations, but about perfect presence. "You had people over?" she said, her voice thick with tears she was trying not to shed. "Some friends stopped by. They thought I might need company." "Friends?" She repeated the word like she was tasting something foreign. "My friends left my party early, Dad. One by one, they found excuses to leave until it was just me and Mark and the catered food nobody really wanted to eat." I watched my daughter sink into Martha's chair, the one I still thought of as belonging to my wife, though she'd been gone for 8 months. Megan looked small in it, like a child playing dress-up in clothes that didn't quite fit. "What happened?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Jennifer left first, said she had family obligations, but I knew she was lying. Then Tom and Linda Harrison made excuses about needing to check on their elderly neighbor. By 7 o'clock, even the couples with children were finding reasons to go home early." The deeper story revealed itself in her recounting. People who'd come expecting a celebration had instead witnessed something that made them uncomfortable. A daughter celebrating Christmas while her recently widowed father served meals to strangers. "Did anyone say anything directly?" Megan's face crumpled like paper being crushed. "Worse. They were too polite to say anything directly. They just looked at me differently, like they were seeing me for the first time and didn't particularly like what they saw." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the Christmas tree where Martha's angel still held the place of honor at the top. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Chen asked where you were. I told her you were busy with other plans, and she said, 'Oh, how wonderful that he's found ways to stay active during his grief. Martha would be so proud.' Then she showed me the pictures from the shelter on her phone. I waited, understanding that sometimes the most important conversations require patience rather than words. Dad, I didn't know people had posted pictures. I didn't know the whole neighborhood could see what you were doing while I was... She stopped herself, unable to finish the sentence. While you were celebrating Christmas without me, I said gently, not to cause pain, but to name the truth that sat between us like an uninvited guest. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. It looked so awful, Dad. On her phone, seeing those pictures of you smiling with families at the shelter, serving food, looking genuinely happy, and knowing that I had specifically told you not to come to my Christmas celebration. The metaphor hung in the air between us. Two different versions of Christmas morning, captured in photographs that told a story neither of us had fully understood while we were living it. Mrs. Chen asked me why my father was spending Christmas serving strangers instead of celebrating with family. I didn't know what to say. What did you want to say? Megan was crying harder now, the kind of tears that come when shame meets recognition. I wanted to lie. I wanted to make up some story about how we'd planned it this way, how we were both doing different forms of service, and how it was all part of some beautiful family tradition. But you didn't. I couldn't. Because looking at those pictures, seeing how genuinely happy you looked, seeing the families you were serving and the other volunteers you were working with, I realized something terrible, Dad. What did you realize? That I excluded you from Christmas, not because your grief would ruin the day, but because your grief reminded everyone, including me, that Mom is really gone. And I wasn't ready to face that. The deeper truth emerged like sunlight breaking through clouds. This had never been about party dynamics or social comfort. It had been about a daughter who was trying to outrun her own grief by creating a version of Christmas that erased all reminders of loss. Oh, sweetheart, I said, moving to sit on the footstool in front of her chair. Grief isn't something you can schedule around. It doesn't respect party plans or Instagram aesthetics. I know that now. But this morning, when I was trying to make Mom's sweet potato casserole and couldn't find the recipe, when I was struggling with the turkey, and realizing I didn't actually know how to cook any of the foods that made Christmas feel like Christmas, I kept thinking about how much easier it would have been to just buy everything pre-made. But that's not what your mother would have wanted. No. Mom would have wanted me to learn, to ask questions, to let you teach me the things she never got the chance to finish teaching me. Her voice broke completely. Instead, I pushed you away because learning from you would have meant admitting that she's really gone. I reached for my daughter's hands, finding them cold despite the warmth of the house. Megan, your mother's death changed everything about how we celebrate holidays. Pretending otherwise doesn't honor her memory. It ignores it. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so incredibly sorry. The surface apology was for excluding me from Christmas dinner. The deeper apology was for trying to erase Martha's memory rather than finding ways to celebrate it. I forgive you, I said simply. But more importantly, I need you to understand something. Your mother's presence in our lives doesn't end just because she's not physically here. Every tradition she loved, every recipe she perfected, every value she taught us, those are gifts that keep giving, but only if we choose to receive them. We sat in silence for a while, my daughter crying quietly while I held her hands and remembered all the times Martha had comforted her through various childhood disasters. Broken friendships, failed tests, teenage heartbreak. Martha had always known that sometimes healing required presence more than words. Dad, Megan said eventually, Would you teach me how to make Mom's Christmas cookies? The real ones? With the measurements that aren't written down anywhere?" I smiled, feeling Martha's presence in the room like warmth from a fire I couldn't see. "I'd love to. But you should know the secret ingredient was never about measurements." "What was the secret ingredient?" "Attention. Your mother made everything with complete attention to the people she was serving. That's what made her cookies. And her love. So impossible to replicate from a recipe." Megan looked around the living room, taking in the evidence of the evening I'd shared with friends who'd understood what she was only now beginning to learn. "Dad, next Christmas, I want to do things differently." "What would differently look like?" "I want to spend Christmas morning at the shelter with you. I want to learn what you learned today about finding joy in service. And then I want to come home and learn how to make Mom's dinner the way she would have wanted it made. With love, with patience, and with room at the table for anyone who needs a place to belong." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the person who'd excluded me that morning, but the person she was choosing to become. Growth, I realized, often arrives disguised as crisis, offering us the chance to become better versions of ourselves if we're brave enough to accept the invitation. "That sounds perfect," I told her. "Your mother would be proud." As I walked Megan to her car an hour later, she turned back one more time. "Dad, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for showing me what Christmas is supposed to look like." I watched her drive away, then stood in my front yard under a sky full of stars that Martha had always said were God's way of reminding us that light persists even in the darkest places. Tomorrow would bring a new year, new challenges, new opportunities to choose love over performance, authenticity over perfection. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced since August. Hope for the future and gratitude for the present moment. Inside, I turned off the Christmas tree lights and headed to bed, already looking forward to the next Tuesday when I would return to the shelter. This time, perhaps, with my daughter beside me, both of us learning what Martha had always tried to teach us, that the best gifts are the ones that change both the giver and the receiver. Christmas morning had begun with exclusion and proceeded through service, community, recognition, and finally, reconciliation. Not the Christmas I'd planned, but exactly the Christmas I'd needed. Just as Martha would have said, sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in disappointment, and the most perfect moments are often the most imperfect ones. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to hear more stories about family, love, and the courage to choose authenticity over perfection. Share your own Christmas memories in the comments below. We'd love to hear how the holidays have shaped your family relationships.